everything in betweens. Welcome back to another episode of the Peasant Party Podcast. I am your host, Charlotte Warren. We're here live in Austin, Texas, and I have a fantastic guest that I'm so excited to introduce. To my right is Laurie Berzack, Carolinas Matchmaker, host of the Love on the Go podcast, among so many other things. And I actually want to let her take it away just because I think she can better explain everything about the fantastic things she does in the dating community, bringing love to people all over the Carolinas and surrounding areas. But Laurie, just take it away. Yeah, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So just arrived in Austin today. I've been a matchmaker for 18 years, and I work with men for traditional matchmaking and help women with online dating.
Nice.
Yes. So we manage all of their accounts, and we can get into that in a deeper way. But I absolutely love what I do. It's just a dream come true kind of a career for me. Every day I wake up excited and just love it all.
I love that. And you mentioned that's a lot of years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
How does one become a matchmaker? Like, how did you get into that career path in general?
I really think it was my calling. It is my calling. Essentially, I was kind of going through a time period in my mid-30s where I was thinking, I know that I'm supposed to be doing something that is extremely meaningful and helpful to people. I have my master's in social work with an emphasis in community organization. So I have like literally the perfect degree to work with communities and to assist people with obviously one of the most important things in their lives, which is finding love and keeping it and selecting the right partner. So I just started matching up friends and family. And I had some great success, and I just decided, let's just make this into a career. And I just kind of buckled down, called everyone I knew to see who they knew that was single, and started meeting with people.
That's awesome. And yeah, I feel like that's the right background, like coming from like social work, like that is probably a really good background to have, just knowing kind of the deep social interactions you probably have, and just you're witnessing people making some of the biggest decisions of their lives that are so personal, feelings they can't always articulate. And you kind of have to have, I think there was a TikTok recently of a woman with her experience with a matchmaker saying, I wasn't woo enough. And you kind of have to have that woo in you, where you just have that intuition, it seems like, when you are a matchmaker.
You do. And then you also need to be able to talk to people that might be coming from a woo place and some that might not be coming from that place. And so I think one of my talents is understanding humans and behaviors and where people are coming from, and to listen more sometimes than to speak, and to like really just kind of get into their soul and what is really happening for them deep inside. Where's the pain and how can I help?
Oh, definitely. And kind of with Carolinas Matchmaker specifically, you mentioned dating coaching for women, traditional matchmaking for men. What is kind of your process, or if you want to explain the two different offerings, like how does that all work?
Yeah, so I like to work with men in the Carolinas. Sometimes a man will hire me from other places, but normally I'll just refer him to a matchmaker in his local area rather than try to do a national search for him. I just like to work local, all over the Carolinas. So essentially men hire me, and I have a very large database of women who have kind of like thrown their hat in the ring, if you will, to say, I'm interested in meeting a quality man. And sometimes I will choose from those folks to introduce them to the men. I meet with everyone before I make a match. I run background checks. I make sure that the men are people that represent me as well as me representing them. So it's really a partnership when somebody hires me. I need to make sure they're good people. If they're not, I let them go.
Yeah. Oh wow. And because I remember there, like I said, there was that TikTok of a woman who said she was rejected by a matchmaker. What is kind of the vetting process? Is it pretty stringent, or do you have like a specific clientele that you work with?
Well, the main thing in terms of the men that hire me for matchmaking is I want to make sure that they're realistic. If a man comes to me and says, I want to date a woman that's 20 years younger and she needs to be a size 0 or 2 and, this, that, and the other, I usually say goodbye because it's very unrealistic. In the Carolinas, women don't really want to date up more than 10 years max. I mean, it's a different community than LA or Miami or New York. So I like to make matches that are closer in age. I understand that sometimes people are attracted to people that are younger or older, whatever it is. So I just try to keep that in mind. So I just want to make sure that somebody is realistic and that we can do a great job for them. And so those are the men that will hire me. And if I don't think I can do a good job for them, I'll refer them to someone else, or I'll simply say, let's kind of just put a pin in it, and we can circle back in 6 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a man who has a lot of social anxiety, what I'm going to recommend to him is a coach or a therapist, as well as online dating, because they can sort of hopefully meet more people and get a little bit more used to dating, where they can kind of set their anxieties to the side and say, okay, this isn't that bad. Because a lot of times men are afraid to ask women out. In today's day and age, people aren't used to doing that. Gen Xers, that's what we did. But the millennials and the Gen Z, they're not used to it as much. They're afraid of rejection. So I think it is sometimes important to work with a coach with online dating. So obviously offer that to men and women, but it's so great for the men when they hire me for matchmaking, because we concierge the entire date and all they have to do is show up. Now, I do show photos ahead, and I talk to them about the women that I'm going to be introducing them to make sure that it's a good match ahead. And then we make the reservation for them, and then I talk to them after the date to find out how it went. And if there's any coaching that I might need to do, I'll do that. And if not, I'll talk to them after the second date, after the third date. I've noticed that if people go on 5 dates with the same person, it normally turns into a relationship of 6 months or more.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good to know, because I feel like it's always like, what is that magic number of dates? When do you know? Because I feel like a lot of people end up on this path maybe where they feel like they're aimlessly dating. Oh, another date this week. Where is this going?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always, people are always curious about that magic number.
It is 5. Once in a blue moon, I've talked to some older, like some seniors, and they'll date more than that before they make a decision. But with younger folks, that is what I've observed anecdotally. So I'd be curious if your audience would agree with me on that.
Yeah, I think the third date, I feel like, is where a lot of stuff happens, where it's either you kind of decide one way, or people feel like they decide one way or the other. Third date happens. It's where do we go from here?
Yep.
When a gentleman signs on as a client of yours, what are kind of the next steps? Do you like fill out a profile for him? Do you come up with something to kind of pitch him to the women that are like in your database, or what does that look like?
So the first thing that people do, whether it's a woman that's interested in online dating or a man that's interested in matchmaking, is they go to my website, carolinasmatchmaker.com. And they fill out a profile. It's free to do that. And then I decide who to get on a call with, or I have other people to get on calls with people. And we do a strategy session to decide if this is kind of the right route for them to go, and just explain all the ways the program works and pricing and whatnot. And then if they decide to move forward, and if we decide to offer them a membership, then there's payment involved, a DocuSign, and then the men that hire us for matchmaking meet the entire team, and we all sort of create a fun queue of ideas for them, and then for the man, and then we discuss, and then we start making appointments to meet the women to make sure that they are what the men are looking for, and vice versa. And then we concierge the first date. For the online dating program, all the people that sign up are assigned a coach, and we do professional photography, styling, makeup. We get great images, like just really down to earth, easygoing pictures inside and outside of the studio in Charlotte. People fly in for this. And so really people can hire me from all over for the online dating program. And what happens is when we get them online with these great pictures and profiles, they essentially are seen more by more people, and the algorithm gets kind of tripped up, and they end up seeing sort of the higher level people. And I actually did an interesting podcast on that with a guy named Will last season on Love on the Go. So if anybody wants to check that one out, where he talks about how before he got the pictures, he was seeing sort of one level of woman, and then after the new pictures, he was seeing like, the attorneys and the whatever, and it doesn't matter what you're looking for, but he just found that for him that was kind of what he was interested in, and then he is engaged now, so that's kind of cool.
Because I feel like as a whole, like I think there's kind of the joke of guys, their dating profiles sometimes look like they're trying to rush a fraternity or something like that, because they don't always take good pictures. It's always zoomed in. It's like it looks like, at best case scenario, it's when they were groomsmen at a wedding or something. But no, I think
10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I think it sounds like it trickles down to any other tools you might be using alongside matchmaking as well.
Yeah. And then what's nice about my coaching program is every week they're on a Zoom call with their coach, and all my people have master's level or undergraduate in English and psychology. We go through their messaging. We teach them how to get a phone number. We run background checks. We'll check out the people on socials. So it's a pretty deep dive that we do before we feel safe sending, our client out or giving them kind of the stamp of approval for the people that they're talking to online. So the people that hire us feel very supported. And it's one thing, I've heard it so many times where a woman says, yeah, I had my girlfriends over, we drinking some red wine, and we got on Bumble. We got me on Bumble. And then the friends leave and the person's like, well, I don't know what to do here, or this is too overwhelming. Because when you first get on Bumble or Hinge or whatever, you get such an onslaught of men that are looking at you. So we're talking heterosexual at the moment, obviously. And then it's like, who are we, who does the woman even talk to? I had one woman, I ran a boot camp a few years back. She had so many men coming at her. She called me up practically crying, saying, I don't know what to do. And I was like, okay, you're graduate level. You went to Columbia. Let's kind of look at guys that are professionals. Let's look at men that, you could see integrating into your family. She had a daughter. So we wanted to make sure he could be like a good mentor and father figure. And we kind of started from there. And she's married now. So that's really cool.
Nice. That's awesome. And yeah, that is something like I feel like women experience. Like you open the dating apps and it's not even so much that you're getting so many matches, because everyone says like it's not about the quantity, it's the quality.
Yes.
And I think everyone just thinks of, not just the quality is in like how good of a person on a scale of 1 to 10, but sometimes it's also how serious are they? Because you hear the stories, like you see the memes and stuff of guys using Tinder where they're just swiping right on everyone saying, I'll deal with the consequences later. And you have no idea who's actually interested. And I feel like matchmaking is kind of a area where who's dating intentionally, who has serious intentions versus.
Yeah. When a woman gets a phone call from me and I say, I've got a man that just hired me for matchmaking, they're like, good, please get me off these apps. I'm so sick of, people that aren't really that serious. And they go out on the dates and they're great quality introductions.
Oh, 100%.
But I've gotten so many people married from online dating that I'll never put that down. It's just you have to be really intentional about it. You need to be really supported and you need to be strategic. Like sometimes in the beginning when I first started doing it for people, I would try to look at all the men that were interested in them. And I got such fatigue from it that I realized that I was swiping left on men that could have been good guys, but I was just tired. So now what we do is we just really try to hone in on five good men a week and just say, okay, let's focus on them. And I love this analogy. I say, let's pretend that you're in a nightclub and there is, you've got 5 people from your queue, let's call it Bumble, in the nightclub with you. Now, if one leaves, the men that are behind the red ropes outside, those are all your beeline men. You can allow one more in and just focus on 5 and try to go on 1 date or 2 dates a week max. Don't worry about the guys outside. If they're meant to be, they're meant to be. So just kind of think in plenty instead of in lack.
Got it.
Yes.
No, I feel like, because I remember when I would be on apps, I was so overwhelmed. Like it wasn't even just, it was just, there were so many. It was, you never knew who was interested. They're all saying the same things. And yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah. And I don't know if you did this when you were there, but it's so important to run background checks.
Yes.
I talk about this all the time. So here's just some advice for your listeners. I would keep everything on the app and don't leave the app until you're ready to meet them. So you have it all in one place. You're not giving out your number to like just anybody. And then when the guy, if it seems to be dribbling on and they're not asking you out, I would say something like, so where do we go from here? Or, I really like this conversation. Why don't we meet in person? It doesn't matter who asks who out. The point is get on a first, meeting. And that's not even considered a date. You and I have talked about this before. That's just a meeting to decide if you want to go on a date. So when you decide where you're going to be meeting, then say, hey, let me grab your number just in case I can't find you at the location. And that's what you take to run a background check. And I recommend TruthFinder or Ben Verified. You can throw that phone number in there. You can get a lot of information. And believe me, I'd say about like 1 in 5 men that I look up have some kind of history.
Yeah.
Now, if it's like 1 DUI from 20 years ago or 10 years ago or something, that's one thing. If it's multiple, that's another. If they're not in recovery or anything like that, then you need to be careful and watch his actions when you meet. Or maybe you decide you don't want to meet him. Or it could be something worse. Assault. I've seen it all. Like, dealing drugs, all the things.
That's so terrifying. Yeah, I have a permanent subscription to Ben Verified.
Yeah.
I pay for it every month, and it comes in handy for anything and everything.
You have to be careful. You have to be so careful. Don't let anybody drive you. If you leave your table, you leave a drink or food, that it's dead to you. You're not allowed to touch it when you get back from the bathroom. So
Mhm.
just be super careful. That's the most important thing with online dating.
100%.
Mhm.
And yeah, because we mentioned first dates. First date, coming from the apps is typically, your pre-date, your date zero kind of thing.
Mhm.
When you set up your dates for your clients, what do they typically look like? Like, what is your go-to first date coming from a professional matchmaker?
So for my matchmaking clients, it
Mhm.
is going to be a nicer date. It's going to be a dinner. It's
Mhm.
going to be, maybe you meet for tapas and drinks at the bar area because it's kind of fun. I've had people go on activity dates before. That's good for people that are like a little bit anxious when they go on dates so that they don't have to like stare at each other the whole time. During COVID, I would send people on dates out in the park, walking
Mhm.
dates. That was entertaining. So anything to kind of keep the energy going.
Nice.
Mhm.
And then how long do you like hold hands through the process? So date one goes well. Oh my goodness, I want to see them again. Is it,
Mhm.
off to the races for them, or do you continue to stay in touch?
So I have the conversation with the woman, and if it's green light for her and for him, then I say to the woman, "Listen, I'm going to step out of the middle now.
Mhm.
If you need anything, please reach out." Normally they don't, but I'll keep in touch with the man and be like, "Hey, have you gone on your date number 2? Make sure to get to it sooner than later, especially if she's like on the fence, where I'll hear from her." This is good advice for any men that are listening. If a woman is kind of on the fence, you're not feeling it 100% from her, get out on a second date and make it really different from the first date.
Mhm.
If it was dinner or drinks the first time, take her axe throwing or go
Mhm.
to the Whitewater Center or just do something fun and lively, music, something fun to kind of shake it up a little bit and make it sooner than later. Otherwise, the woman is just going to be like, I wasn't really feeling it. I think I'm just going to pass
Mhm.
on the second date. So get to it fast. But I do talk to the guy because I want to see, is he going to make it to date number 5 or do I need to start looking for another introduction for him?
Mhm.
I don't like to do more than one introduction at a time for my clients.
Mhm.
I'm always like thinking who would I introduce him to next. But I feel like men get very distracted and I just feel like it's best to like really give one woman a chance at a time.
Totally.
Mhm.
And that was going to be my next question: is do
Yeah.
you match people up, concurrently with
No.
multiple matches?
Now, I will in this occasion where I introduce him to a woman and she's like, I think he's a nice guy. I'm not really sure there's chemistry there, but I'll see him again. And then I find out from him, oh, well, she can't go out again until like 3 weeks from now because she's going
Mhm.
away or something. Then I'll probably throw another match in there just to kind of keep him busy and excited about the process.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, because and I think just to pivot, because one of the big questions I wanted to ask you was kind of just knowing you have many years of experience
Yeah.
in matchmaking. What kind of trends have you seen change over time? Because I feel like I've heard more about matchmakers
Mhm.
probably since COVID. Like you hear about it a lot more.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just marketing. I don't know if it's just TikTok.
Mhm.
But and of course, dating has evolved a lot as
Yeah.
well. I think, yeah, Tinder. I remember when Tinder came about when I was in college in like 2014.
Yeah.
So I guess I was curious, what like trends have you noticed change in dating over time? Any that you are excited about and think are a good thing? Any that you think maybe are detrimental or not as good of a thing?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Well, since I first started matchmaking 18 years ago, obviously people weren't really texting back then.
Mhm.
So the whole texting thing is really, I think, a positive because it's easy to get in touch with people. But the negative part about it is people don't talk on the phone anymore.
Mhm.
And that's like such a really great way to communicate with people. It's very sensual. People get excited about it. You really get to have deep conversation. So I think that people try to use humor by text and it's lost.
Mm.
Or somebody's just not a great texter. And then the other person gets bored by it. Also, it's so easy to keep in touch with people by text that a guy could be texting a woman, 25 different women, "Good morning, beautiful."
Mhm.
And you don't really know, am I the only one that's getting these text messages or whatever? And same with women, they're just kind of collecting people. So it's really, really different than, again, like a Gen Xer who, people needed to like write a letter or make a phone call or really be very, very intentional about reaching out. That being said, it is easier to stay in touch with people. So if somebody's traveling or whatnot, it's just easier. So that's good. I think that online dating, while it's wonderful, and it can be used for good, it can also be a negative. There's a lot of, men on there that are just players or just using women. There are, on Facebook, there's different groups,
Mhm.
which shall not be named,
Mhm.
because we've all sworn into secrecy that we won't talk about it. So you guys know what I'm talking about, where women talk about men that they've been dating online. That's good and bad. It's bad when he's a good guy, but maybe he's just not interested in people. And people are like, oh, he ghosted me. We talked about this on the podcast you did with me. Well, it wasn't really a ghost. He just wasn't interested in you, and he didn't reach out again. But here are women that are kind of feeling rejected and saying negative things about somebody when he didn't do anything wrong. He just maybe didn't follow up or whatever it is. Versus where it is good, some of these online sites where women are like, okay, this guy's married. He's having affairs with 5 different women. Nobody knows. There's a baby mama, whatever it is. Or, this is the really destructive thing that he did to me. We moved in together, then he left, and all these things. So I will check these sites for my clients. That's part of the background checking that I'm doing and on social media and whatnot. I want to figure out, are they married? So there are a lot of kind of bad guys that are online dating that you just sort of need to figure out. And they have figured out how to fool a lot of women. And women are very vulnerable. Men are too, but I think women are more. So positive and negatives there.
You notice any like trends in preferences? Like have people's preferences changed or what they're looking for, whether that's a certain, I don't know, look, a certain belief or value system? Has that changed over time at all?
It's interesting. I feel like when I first started my business, people did not care about politics. It wasn't even a thing. And then obviously, more recently, I did have to add in, I don't ask people, what are your politics? What I say is your future partner's political affiliation important to you? And I love that question because it says a lot, but it can be so divisive also. So I do push back on that with people. I'm just not excited about this next election cycle because of it.
Oh, goodness.
Now,
yeah.
we do have a lot of conservative folks down south and also people that are more religious. And I would say that that's kind of the differences between maybe, some of the northern cities or, western cities. Women like to get married younger in the Carolinas than other places if they were born and bred there. So then they get to 30 and they look around and all their friends are married with kids and they come to me and they're like, I need to do something, help me. And that's what's so great about being able to hire a good matchmaker who can really kind of direct you and guide you through the process.
Oh, totally. And kind of when you get maybe people that are in those like panicked states where it's just, is that something that maybe you have some like guidance for, or are they often like dating from a healthy place, or do they have to like kind of work through that in some ways?
Yeah, I think it's important to work through that. It's interesting. I was sitting and having dinner with a bunch of women in their early to mid 30s recently, and they were all talking about freezing their eggs. Even one of the women who is recently married. And I was like, well, why don't you just have a baby if you're that worried about it? She's like, I'm not ready yet. And I get it and I respect it. So, in my opinion, women should just go ahead and freeze their eggs in their 20s and then not worry about like trying to find a father of their future children. I was talking to a single mom on my podcast this past week about this very thing. She elected to have a child and raise her child, solo, and she has a nice support system to do that. But I just feel like when you're looking for the father of your future children and your future partner, it can get tricky and it can be concerning because I think that it's hard to kind of see straight and it does create anxiety. And I hate that for people. So I think that if you can freeze your eggs and just put that one thing on the back burner, then you can have a little bit less anxiety.
Oh, no, 100%. And it's something I see a lot where it's, and maybe it's just working in tech, but employers sharing that it's a benefit that's offered.
Yes.
And it's one of those too, where it's like, even if something happens, just having that kind of insurance for yourself, I think is really valuable.
Yeah. Or I say to people, have your baby. If that's really your desire, your deepest desire, have the baby and then find your husband later.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good alternate.
Totally. And I guess maybe I'm just curious because I think like that, like early 30s is kind of where a lot of my audience is.
Yeah.
How do men typically respond to this, or maybe or if you're privy to those conversations behind closed doors, is there, when men get the conversation of, hey, I'm freezing my eggs. Like, how do the men seem to feel about it?
Well, it's funny because I have a client that I'm working with right now, and she said, "Yeah, I'm hoping and it's the beginning of her program, and she said I'm going to be starting this process in about 3 weeks with the hormones and everything." And I'm thinking, "Oh my goodness, I hope she's going to be okay," because it can really mess with your head. It's like not the ideal time. So I was like, "Is there any way you could start that after our 3-month program?" And she's like, "Well, I've got this already set up." I'm like, "Okay." It's so smart, but I think that if she said to somebody on a date, "Yeah, I'm going through the process of freezing my eggs," it might take somebody aback at first, but then he might think, "That's pretty cool." You're sort of taking action into your own hands, and it's not like, we're cutting out the man by any means, but it's just a woman saying, "I'm independent, I'm resourceful, and I'm smart."
And also it's, not the feeling of as much being rushed or, like you're not coming in with that kind of same rush feeling that you might have been otherwise.
100%.
Yeah. No, that's good to know, because I feel like those are conversations that are just coming up in my like personal social circle a lot.
I've been hearing it too.
You mentioned people coming in being unrealistic. What are the biggest things you maybe have to talk people down to earth from? And has anything like that changed over time? Have you noticed that changing since like social media has evolved and stuff?
So the number one thing that I need to talk women down from is looking for a very tall man. It's a big problem. I mean, do you know what the average height of an American man is?
5'9".
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're all looking for over 6 foot. Not all, but many.
Yeah.
And it's annoying
it's
to
so
me, especially. Do you know what I always say? I mean, I just think about like me. All right, my husband is tall. He's 5'11" and a half. So, but I did once date a guy who was my height, and I was like, this is pretty cool. I had no problem with it at all. I thought it was great. Of course, like my late father, he was 5'6", and he was the most amazing human being in the world. So it's like, you got to put things into perspective. When you're walking around your place at home, maybe you've got a kid there or two, in the future, and your husband comes home from work and you give him a kiss hello, does it really matter if he's like 2 or 3 inches taller? Or does it matter that he loves you, he adores you, and he's a provider and all of the things? And I'm not saying that the women aren't working. They've already, come down from their office upstairs or whatever it is. So just setting the stage. But the point is that I think that it doesn't make sense to me that women care that much about height. And they're just like, I just want to feel feminine. It's like, is that about you? Like, don't put so much emphasis on the external, like look at the internal instead. So that's one huge bit of advice that I have for women. And then men, they're kind of caught up a little bit with weight. And I'm so over that as well. But interestingly, I think that when they come to a matchmaker, they say they want a certain size or whatever. But then when they're out and about, they just meet somebody who they vibe with, and it kind of doesn't matter what their weight is. So I do think that sometimes when a man hires a matchmaker, they're pickier than they would be when they're just out and about. So it's something curious.
Interesting. And I feel like both of those things too. It's the quantifiable. There's something like quantifiable about it, and I think that's kind of a frustrating thing about the dating apps with height.
Yeah.
I think so many women I have no idea what 6 feet looks like. Maybe that's because I'm 5'2".
Yeah.
But I firmly think that there's a lot of women who are parroting 6 feet because they heard 6 feet, 6 figures, like 6-pack abs or something. And if a guy who's 5'10" approached them at a bar, they would not know the difference. Yeah. And I think the same goes for weight. Like, it can be distributed very differently. Yeah. So I feel like so many men are surprised when they learn a woman is a size 6 or a size 8, or oh, whoa, you're a size 2. Like, I think all that gets lost on kind of crossing genders and whatnot.
Yeah. Plus, I think women kind of get caught up in that sometimes. And what they'll do is they'll think, well, if I can attract a man by maybe an older photo of me where I am 15 or 20 pounds lighter, when they meet me, it'll all go away and they'll be super excited. That's not what happens. What happens is a man shows up and he's annoyed that she, showed a picture that was old. So what I do with my clients, it doesn't matter what your size is. Show what you look like. So when they go styling with my stylist, and we get these really pretty pictures taken full length, curvy women, beautiful women, all shapes and sizes. The men see what they look like, and the men that authentically are interested in you will say, hello, I'm interested. And I've had plenty of plus size women very successfully find husbands, get married, have children, do all the things. So the most important thing is be authentic and show exactly what you look like.
Yeah, definitely. And especially just if there's any time to be rejected, it's when you have no idea that you've been rejected.
Yeah,
versus
who cares?
taking the time, like going and having this more public kind of feeling.
All you need is to be real and show up looking what you look like, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And I just feel like there's been such an emphasis in society for just skinny and all that kind of thing. I'm over it.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I feel like those are just things you hear a lot, like just on TikTok too, where it's just, oh, he's got to be 6 feet. And then some guy chimes back with, oh, well, how much do you weigh? And it's always about the heights and the weights.
It is always.
Yeah. TikTok. It's always, and that's also, I think I kind of jumped right into the intro, but I really do like to follow, professional matchmakers on TikTok because it's just such nuanced, good takes where you see and hear from different daters every single day versus TikTok where it's this like 1-2 punch, like what got people, riled up in the first 5 seconds. A lot of times too, something will go viral because it's a bad take. It's just getting attention because people are commenting and frustrated. So I can't stress enough, following people like you, following true professional matchmakers is, I think, something that's helped me, and that's where I go to first when I want to hear the real advice. Yeah,
for sure. And I know something that you were interested in when we were talking before is what do you need? Are there certifications or whatnot when you want to become a matchmaker? And there are organizations out there that offer certifications. I'm one of the 3 co-founders of the Matchmakers Alliance. Matchmaker Maria, who Michelle Jacoby and I founded this, I think it's 12, 14 years ago. I can't remember anymore. And we, once a year, take matchmakers to amazing locales. We've been hosting it in Cancun, Mexico the last few years. And basically we train matchmakers on how to we collaborate, we train them on everything to do with running a business, a matchmaking business, how to actually do the good matching coaching and whatnot. And so I love that because there's it's not like in the legal profession or the medical profession where, you have to pass these certain tests or becoming an accountant. It helps to have some kind of an advanced degree like I have, but you don't need that to be a matchmaker. What you need, though, is to know how to run a business and how to be a good matchmaker, dual pronged. That's why a lot of matchmakers go out of business in the first couple of years. They're good at one or the other, but they're not good at everything. And then you need to be able to wear like 1,000 hats, from being able to be on podcasts to writing to understanding website development and, how to get your message out there, how to be on TV, how to do the blogging, how to have the SEO, the CRM, all the things. And then how to deal with people, how to handle conflict, how to make matches, everything to do with online dating if you're doing that. So, how to there's so much to it. It is a big job.
Oh, absolutely. And it seems like it's like recruit, but even harder where it's someone's, the biggest and most personal decision that someone has to make. And there's a lot of feelings on the line, feelings that people don't know how to articulate. Like, it's not like, what was your performance at your past job? It's, why did your last relationship end? Even if someone is being totally honest, like sometimes, your feelings are hard to articulate, or your observations, and it is the truth to you.
Totally.
As far as like, the some of like the matches that have been kind of maybe like most memorable for you, do you have any that have been recent or like success stories that you're really proud of, or any funny stories that come with it?
Yeah, for sure. So I was thinking about that. I have a couple that I introduced, an older couple, seniors. He was 72 when he hired me.
Oh, nice.
And he wanted a woman who was affectionate. So we'd go on a date and he'd say, well, she didn't want to hold my hand on the first date. Who wants to hold your hand on the first date? I thought it was so unrealistic. It took me like maybe 5 different women. Finally, I introduced him to somebody, and she had been caretaking her son for like basically her entire adult life. And he was finally on his own. And I remember she actually took a boot camp that I held a couple years ago, and she had a photo shoot, and she just said, I feel alive again. And I introduced him to her, and they ended up traveling all over together. She moved into his house, and they just send me pictures and of all the different locales, and then they got engaged over Thanksgiving. And he just said, "I've never been happier." I did a little reel on it on Instagram if you want to look at it. It's adorable. I had another couple. She hired me for online coaching, and the first week she found a guy. He was on. We did it on Match.com. And he was on privacy mode. So he saw her, but she didn't see him because I was like, how come I can't? I didn't find this guy. It's like, privacy. And they went out a few times, and then she introduced him to her friends. He was super quiet during the date. And she was like, well, I don't know if this is going to work out. My ex-husband, and she was also a single mom or shared custody, was not very social when we went on date, when we would go out with friends. So I don't think it's going to work. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Why don't you talk to him about it? And that's something that people have a really hard time doing. So I always advise my clients, like, try to handle conflict, try to handle different things that arise during the dating process so that you can see, does your boyfriend, girlfriend handle it with anger? Are they rude? Do they disconnect? How do they handle conflict? So it's really good to just practice that. So she had a conversation with him, and he said, you know what? The first time I meet people, I'm a little quiet. I kind of want to read the room. And then the next time you'll see, I'll be fine. And sure enough, he was. She literally said to me, Laurie, if you hadn't said that to me, I would have just cut the cord and broken up with him, because she just didn't want to repeat a pattern. And that's where it can be difficult, because people will self-sabotage just based on one or two experiences that they've had in the past that they're just thinking is relatable. But it's not always. And she also hired a therapist to kind of help her through it. So I thought that was brilliant. And now they're engaged. I'm so excited for them. Okay, I had another couple who I was just really fortunate. She met him the first week that I got her on Bumble. And she was dating different people, but then she's like, Laurie, I don't want to date anybody else. I'm really into him. They had the conversation. He said to her, listen, you can date other people, but I'm not interested. I'm going to take myself off Bumble. She's like, okay, that sounds good. Me too. And they really tried to give it a go. She went to a party with him, and he kind of left her on her own. He saw that she was super social, chatting up all of his friends, and he just went and hung out with his friends. And afterwards, she discussed it with me. I said, well, why don't you have the conversation with him? And she said to him, I don't want you to leave me alone when you go to these parties. Like, I literally want to hang out with you. It's not like I'm clingy and I can handle myself on my own. I'm a mature, independent woman, resourceful, but I want to hang out with you. He heard her. The next time they went to a party, they hung out together. So I think, like, it's just so important to just be able to have those challenging conversations with the people that you're dating. Same thing when you're married. It's interesting because a lot of people, I think, that get divorced, I think that, and the people that say to me, we grew apart. It's like, I always think to myself, like, what were they like in the beginning when they were so in love that actually drew them to marriage? Then how do you grow apart? And I get it. I mean, I'm married 29 years, and believe me, you have to work on your relationship. This is not an easy thing, especially when you become an empty nester. That's when people look at their partner and they're like, all right, is this somebody I want to spend like the second half of my life with or the last third of my life with? And you need to work on it. You need to surprise each other. You need to do a whole bunch of things. So just because your relationship is going through different, like, dips and highs and lows, even at the beginning, even when you're first married, it doesn't mean anything. It just means you need to hunker down. You need to really, like, invest in your relationship. Don't get so distracted by kids or by family or friends or work. Like, always put your relationship in the center as a central item of your life, because when you get distracted and you sort of veer off track is when things happen.
Oh, I can imagine. And I know, usually I talk to people that are, dating, maybe not yet in a relationship, but what do you recommend for people that are in long-term relationships to keep the spark, to make the relationship still feel new, keep that, like, honeymoon phase going? Like, what's your kind of recommendation? Like, how often should you have date night? Like, that kind of thing.
I think you should at least have one date night a week. And I think it's fun to surprise each other with a date where the other person has no idea what you're doing and just keep switching off. And then I think it's important also to do things with other people. Don't just sit around every night and do exactly the same thing. I have friends that play games at night with their partners. They get together and they do different things with other couples. I think that just, you need to constantly be learning when you're in a relationship. Because think about it, in the very beginning, when you're kind of peeling back all the layers of the onion, it's so fascinating to find out about that person. There's also like fun like games out there and cards and things like that where you ask your partner things that, you know, maybe you don't know about. Because I think that people stop saying to their partners, like, what do you think? And what are you thinking about right now? Like, you're curious. You just sort of, you need to stay curious about your partner.
Oh, totally. And I guess I don't mean to pivot this too much, but I think a question just popped in my head of what are your favorite first date questions, or what do you think are essential questions that maybe reveal a lot more?
Well, I think I'll say some of the don'ts first. I don't think that you should talk about negativity, anything negative that has happened in past relationships or horror stories about online dating or anything like that. But I do think it depends on the conversation. Like I used to say, don't talk about, you know, your ex. You don't want it to become a therapy session. So if somebody has been divorced, or, you know, maybe they were in a long-term relationship and it didn't work out, if the other person's like, well, tell me about, you know, your dating history, it's perfectly fine to say something like, listen, I'm an open book and I'm happy to talk to you about my previous relationships, but I'm here with you tonight and I want to find out about you. You know, tell me a little bit more about, you know, your yoga or your hiking or whatever. So I would keep the first date light and fun. It's all about, is there a little bit of chemistry? Are you laughing together? Are you having fun? You don't have to get so deep into all the things on a first date. That being said, I've had clients get together and like lay it all out on the table. And they come back to me and they're like, well, we talked about all the things that we weren't supposed to talk about. Religion, politics, exes. I was like, okay. And they went out again. So I feel like there's no fast and furious rule around all the first dates, but I think try to find out a little bit about their family, you know, their social life, you know, what they like to do for fun, hobbies. I mean, everybody knows this already. I'm not saying anything that's different. But I think, you know, maybe some open-ended questions. Make sure to listen. I think people are so worried about what they're going to say next that they're not really hearing what the other person is saying. So ask a question and then ask another one and ask another one. But then don't go back to your friends and say, well, he didn't ask me anything about me.
Oh,
Because you're asking all the questions. But people do love to talk about themselves.
Totally. No, and like I could totally see that. Like I think people just get so nervous, they get so tripped up. I guess I feel like one thing that's been very polarizing is, and I think maybe it's so polarizing because we don't really know how it would feel for anybody else, but that's the spark. How do you feel about the spark? Is it important? Like, do you have to feel a spark? Should you?
There has to be a spark, but that doesn't always happen for women on the first date. I do think it's important for the men to have the spark on the first date, though, because that's kind of what drives them to get out on a second date. Otherwise, they're a little too passive, and then the woman's leading it. Women, we're very evolved beings, and we are capable of falling in love after we get to know somebody and to become attracted. I've had many people say, I'm not sure about it. Even people that I've gotten married, I'm not 100% positive. I thought he was attractive. I felt very comfortable with him. We laughed. I'm not sure if he's the one. They continue to go out. They're married. But for the men, most 9 times, 10 times out of 10, if they come to me and say, I'm not really sure I'm attracted, it's not ever going to work out. Now, even things like, I wasn't sure if I was attracted to bald men, but I'll meet him. And then sure enough, like the women like him. So it has nothing to do with anything physical or anything. It's just, how is the man treating them? How are they communicating in between dates? Are they treating them, you know, with respect? Are they having fun? So the magic formula that I have found is 2 things. Number 1, there has to be attraction and there has to be a feeling of home where you're so comfortable with that person that you just, it doesn't feel like a typical first date where you're like, okay, this is my like, I feel like I've known this person forever. That's the feeling that I hear when I hear those 2 things on a first date. I know this is going to work out. Unless somebody massively screws up, it turns into something. So look for those 2 feelings. Attraction doesn't mean I want to jump his bones feeling. It just means, okay, I like the way he looks. I like his vibe, and like, you know, I'm feeling good about his essence. That could even be attraction for the first date.
Yeah. And Yeah, no, I totally agree, because I know that sometimes there's the spark and then there's the slow burns, and some people are just different too. Like some people, they say I'm a slow burn type. Some say I if there's no spark. Yeah. And I have no idea what other people's sparks feel like, and I only know mine and what it's led to. Yeah. I guess like one listener wrote in asking how do you define settling? Like I think there's a lot of people that say like don't settle, but they kind of want to know what is settling and what's the line between giving something a fair chance and then settling or maybe wasting someone's time.
Yeah, and I read that letter. You sent that to me by email, and she said that her friends and family were kind of like putting her down, like saying, well, don't settle with him, when she mentioned that she was curious about a guy that they'd gone to high school with, that had a graduate degree and seemed like a good guy and had a lot to offer. I think that she was getting a little bit caught up in external factors and what other people were saying. I think you sometimes need to block that out. And she needs to go within. A really good idea for people that are dating is to learn the art of meditation and being still and breathe. I think that people are spinning right now in society. We're so busy on our phones. I mean, myself included. My God, it's like I wake up in the morning and I know I shouldn't look at my phone, but before I meditate, I look at my phone. It's like, Laurie, you're doing this wrong. But anyway, the point is that you need to sit quietly with yourself. And what I always say about meditation is that everybody says to me things like, oh, I can't meditate. I can't turn off my brain. Well, of course, that's everyone's experience with everything in life and meditation. But for those 5 seconds or 2 seconds where you say, oh, I'm supposed to be meditating, let me clear my brain. That is the art and the practice of meditation, so that later on in the day, when a negative thought comes in, you can say, oh, I don't want to be thinking about that, and you let it go. So it's the thought coming in and letting it go where you realize that you are not your brain. And if everybody is saying things to you and your brain is taking over, then you're not like heart-centered. And that's the whole idea, is we want to be connected to our heart and our spirit, not our heads and our brains. So I think a lot of people out there make a mistake and they say, okay, this guy is husband material. He checks all the boxes, but they're not feeling it. But they say, but he'll be a good father, and my mother likes him, and my friends think he's a great guy, and there's nothing wrong with him. So why don't I choose him? But that's not the right partner. And then you'll come to me 25 years later with 2 kids and a divorce and say, yeah, I never felt anything for him, but I just got married because all of my friends were married and he seemed like a good guy, and they were thinking from their heads and not their hearts. So I think the most important thing for that person that wrote to you is to listen to your gut and listen to your heart and tune out all the naysayers and all the people that are thinking some kind of way. Go out with that guy from high school and see what he's like and give it a real shot. And don't just think about your checklist.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's great advice, because I think there's a lot of noise. I feel like that happens a lot with daters nowadays. Like not just friends. It's everything on your phone. Am I looking for the right thing? Is this the right person? Like, should I have these box checking items? Yeah, my heart feels good, but the wannabe SoundCloud rapper who sleeps on his mom's couch, maybe he's a smooth talker, but is that a good long-term partner or something like that? I think it can always be like a fine line between like the head and the heart dance that people do.
And I'll give you an example. I have a client right now who is, she just started out. She's recently divorced. And she's going out with a guy who is not her usual type, but he cooks for her. He has fixed things in her house. She's wildly attracted to him. And he's in constant communication. And she feels so good when she's with him. And even though that he doesn't have the typical job that she normally dates, she got like a little bit twisted up in the head. Like, is this the kind of guy that could be my forever person? I said, well, we don't know yet. Keep dating him and all will be revealed. So don't look so much at the external and what society is thinking of for you, but look inside. How does this person make me feel? And is he giving me the respect that I deserve? And so a lot of that is all about self-love.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's a reason there's so many Hallmark movies about the high-powered lawyer who goes home and finds the hometown hunk who teaches her the meaning of Christmas. Like, there's a reason that movie exists.
Exactly. 1,000 times.
Yeah. And Laurie, where can we find you? What's coming up with Love on the Go? What episodes can we tune into? Send us some final parting words. Where to find you? How can we keep in touch and get more of your fantastic advice?
Well, follow me on TikTok, Matchmaker Laurie Berzack. That's what I am on TikTok. And on Instagram and Facebook, it's Carolinas Matchmaker. I do some fun reels. Love on the Go. I've got some really wonderful podcasts. Some of my hot ones were Matchmaker Maria, who I know we both know and adore and love.
She's the best.
She is the best. And I have Julie Lobby, who works with me. We describe the entire program that we have for online dating management. You can check that one out. Erica Etton's a great one. Ellis Caduto did one about, these are all Matchmaker friends, approaching women on the wild. That hit hard. So I think that one exciting one that I have coming up is with Damona Hoffman. She just wrote a book called F the Fairy Tale, so that's going to be fun. She's on the Drew Barrymore show as a guest often. And if anybody is interested in talking to me, no matter where you live, I can help you with online dating. If you're in the Carolinas, hire me for matchmaking, dudes. And this has been amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out here today. This has been a great conversation. I love having great guests on this podcast, and it really means the world to me. I had a great time being on Love on the Go as well. So everyone should check out that episode.
Yes.
But Laurie, seriously, thank you so much. Any final words?
I just want to say how much I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. All right. We're going to over and out this. Boop.